All right, welcome back to the program. It's time for us now to look at the agenda of the day. The cost of food and perhaps how we can link it with post-harvest losses. Ibrahim Maigari is the founder and chief executive officer at Rice Africa. He's joining me right now via Zoom. Good morning to you and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nancy. How are you doing? How is Abuja?
Abuja is fine. Where are you exactly? Are you in Lagos? Which part of the country are you? Or are you in one remote area?
I'm in Lagos. Nancy. I'm in Lagos.
Okay. Okay, let me start from there since you say you are in Lagos. And I want to start with the first question, really, because I've heard some debate. And even sometimes when I think about food in Nigeria, the outputs, and perhaps what we also put in, do you think that we are in a food crisis in Nigeria? Do you think we're already in a food crisis?
Well, a couple of months ago, I think, about a month or two ago, we had the same discussion, Nancy, if you could remember, and I told you that by all indications, we're going to slide into a massive food crisis if care is not taken. And I absolutely believe, of course, we pray that God intercedes, but I absolutely believe we're getting into that. And then back then, I told you that the insecurity in most farming communities will definitely lead to. And after then, as we knew, the FAO released a report to validate our discussion on the program, stating that same fact that insecurity will definitely lead to a massive food security in the country. And I think we're just getting into it. But this is a very prayerful country. And God has a way of solving our problems sometimes without our intervention. So I pray we get out of it sooner, but by all indications, we're getting to that. Or we are in the
Since we're started on this foundation, because that's the foundation we should really start from, and you said that we should pray that we should not get into it. It's not a matter of prayer now. It's a matter of taking the actions. Have you seen specific actions, perhaps by government, about this issue so that we don't get into a crisis if we are not already in one?
Well, regarding this current farming season, I don't think there's anything that the government can do now. But of course, in recent weeks, we've seen an escalation in the fight against banditry, especially in the northwest, and we've seen some considerable progress in the northeast. In fact, from what we've been hearing, a lot of communities in the northeast, the Boko Haram areas, have started going back to farm, and for a very long time, I think this year we'll see farmers cultivating their lands in those parts of the country. And of recent, at least, we've seen some effort from the security, gallant men and women of the armed forces doing some incredible jobs in the northwest. So but I don't think it has any impact on the current because the rainy season harvesting period is just weeks from now. Some have already started harvesting some crops in the next 2-3. So nothing I don't think would be, or it will boost confidence so that farmers will gladly return to their farms against the next farming season. And for those that are in dry season farming, which starts around December area, I think there will be an offset, and which may sort of in bringing down the impact that we envisage.
Let's talk about the Ministry of Agriculture, because that's the organ of the federal government that it's responsible perhaps for some of the things we'll be talking today. Of course, in agriculture, there's linkage, not just agriculture, ministry, water resources, and perhaps even environment, But let's take a look at the ministry itself. The president did have a shake-up in that ministry about 3 weeks ago or so, where he did change the minister. What kind of agenda do you think that this new minister should have, especially for agriculture? In fact, I was listening to an interview of the Ghana minister in fact, in Ghana, their minister is called the Minister of Food food is there. The Minister of Food and Agriculture, that's what it is called in Ghana. Here it's called Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. In fact, when I was listening to the man, I could even understand without being in Ghana what the policies are. They have planting for jobs and all of that. But here in Nigeria, Minister of Agriculture, at least the last one that was there, I didn't get to even hear so much from him. What is the new agenda that you think that this new minister should have? I don't know about the rural development side, but for the agriculture.
Yeah. Yeah, to be frank, this is just advisory. My honest opinion to whoever is the Federal Ministry of Agri is to let's do less of talking and let's do more of doing. And there are a lot of programs going on, a lot of countless initiatives here and there. Let's just strip down all the layers and go deep down into what works. And this country has precedent. We've had ministers, let me be very straightforward. We've had ministers in the past, like Adesina, the current ANDB president. He had a tremendous impact on the agricultural sector. And people like us were inspired by Mr. Adesina to even venture into the agri space, coming from the technology background. So let's look back. Let's forget about government, who was there, who is there. Let's look at the past, the present, and the future. What works? What is working in other places like you mentioned, and come up with people-oriented programs that will involve the private sector. Involving the private sector, as we are going to talk about, is going to solve a lot of problems from post-harvest loans, from pre-harvest, from cultivation, and a lot of other things. That was what made Dr. Adesina's tenure much more different, because there was this involvement of a lot of players from the private sector. They brought in a lot of know-how, and then they leverage on the expertise of the federal ministry. So my honest opinion is for the current minister to strip down all the talk, all the grammar, stick to what works, and let's see impact. Forget about it. They just have about a year close to go for this the second term of this regime. So we need to see, and perhaps maybe that's what prompted the sacking or the stepping aside of the previous minister. Like you said, there was nothing concrete from that angle. But my hope and prayer is that whoever is there now to look at what works, look into the past, what worked in the past. I mean, there's nothing wrong in copying from other places, and then let's just get in front. Let's stop talking and let's start doing.
Now, the question of, do we produce enough for Nigerians to eat? Okay, let's take a look at, yes, okay, let's take a look at these three scenarios. Can you hear me now? Let's take a look at these three scenarios. How much do we produce? I lost your audio. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can hear you. I can hear you clearly. I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Mr. Maigari, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Should we take a break? When we come back, we'll continue with Ibrahim Maigari, who is the founder and the chief executive officer at Rice Africa. We're looking at the cost of food and post-harvest losses in Nigeria. We'll be right back.
my view is, number one, that the only exchange rate that I recognize today in the Nigerian foreign exchange market, which is a dominant market, remains the investors and exporters window, which is the market that we expect everybody that wishes to procure foreign exchange, or somebody who wants to sell foreign exchange, go to your bank. The investors and exporters window will attend to you. I'm sorry to say that I do not, and I do not intend to recognize that there are any other rates in the market. And I will give you explanation. 8 weeks ago, yes, you are very correct, we did stop the allocation of foreign exchange to the BDCs. Indeed, we began to ask ourselves, why did you wait for so long that we continued to do this? The reason is because Nigeria remains the only country on earth. The Central Bank of Nigeria remains the only central bank in the world, as at 8 weeks ago, that would dip its hands into its reserves, our commonwealth, and you pack dollars and begin to sell it to borrow exchange operators in the market, all in an attempt to stabilize foreign exchange rate in the market.
All right, Ibrahim Maigari is back. He's the Chief Executive Officer and the founder of Rice Africa. Mr. Maigari, can you hear me now?
Perfectly, Nancy, I can hear you.
Okay. Just before we went on that break, what I wanted to ask you was that how much food do we produce enough food for all Nigerians? That's one part. The second part is, if we produce enough food for Nigerians, why do we still have post-harvest losses? That's the second part. The third part is that if we do produce enough, why is still food inflation high when most of the food we produce is wasted? Then the other part of it is the import bill, food import bill. In fact, I think over 600 billion naira. Can you hear me, Mr. Maigari? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just...
Yes.
This is a very serious jam question.
Okay.
Well,
a
let me give it a try.
Yes, but I hope you understand what I'm saying.
I don't
I'm
think
trying
we
to link
produce what we
everything
can
together.
consume.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
I don't think we produce what is sufficient for our consumption. Of course, it's obvious. This is a country of over 200 million. Let me give you a context from the sector that I'm much more comfortable with, the rice sector. Our consumption in the rice sector is over 7.something million metric tons, while our production is way around, I mean, the best we had was a little less than 4.5 million metric tons. So obviously the production is not equivalent to consumption in that regard. So, and it goes around. And you also brought in the issue of post-harvest losses. If we can't produce what is sufficient for us, and why are we having post-harvest losses? Post-harvest losses, Nancy, doesn't mean it is not consumed, so it is wasted. Post-harvest losses is one of the reasons why we're even having increase or increment in prices of foodstuff, because losses happen from production up to consumption. And that does not mean it is consumption-wise, like we can't consume what we produce, so we are wasting. No. Some of the losses happen at the point of production, processing, and transportation, and I mean, to the whole value chain. And it affects, of course, the production. Sometimes, for instance, in rice production now, if our target is to produce 5 million metric tons, in order to reach the 7.something million metric tons, which is the figure or the stage that we will say we are rice sufficient in terms of production. If our harvest is bedeviled with a lot of
issues that leads to losses. We may not even get that 5 million. We may end up having 4-point-something million metric tons. So it's adding up to our inability to meet the required percentage to be self-sufficient. So, I mean, it's not that because we produce a lot and we cannot consume, and that's why we are wasting. No, it cuts across all the sectors, like I said, from harvest to processing to the level of the consumer. I don't know if I've answered your question, Nancy.
Yes, you've seemingly attempted that. What am I seeing on the screen exactly now? Okay, okay. You seemingly attempted my jam question, as you said earlier. I'm feeling like a teacher, a lecturer, or perhaps an invigilator. But let me stick a bit with your sector, which you mentioned earlier, rice. I know you said that post-harvest losses is experienced along the value chain, but which part of the rice value chain, which is your sector, which part of it do we experience mostly the post-harvest losses? Is it milling? Is it harvesting? Is it parboiling? Which of those do we experience most of the post-harvest losses?
Okay, excellent question, Nancy. Excellent. Look, in 2019, a report released by one of these consultancy firms revealed that Nigerians actually harvested 3.2 million hectares of rice. All right, 3.2 million hectares of rice was harvested by almost 1.something million farmers, thereabout. So on further investigation, we discovered that 92% of those rice farmers harvested manually. I want that to sink in. 92% of the farmers that harvested the 3.2 million hectares harvested manually. So we're talking about just 8% harvesting using mechanized and modern methodologies. So if 92% of your farmers harvest manually, let me make it simple for you to understand how losses occur at that part of the value chain. A typical farmer, a local rural farmer, let's assume he has 1 acre. Let's say one acre of rice. Assuming that acre is supposed to give him manually, if he harvests manually, that acre may give him, let's say, 10 bags, if he harvests manually. But if he uses a mechanized system like a combined harvester, that land may give him about 17 bags of rice. This is not just an increase in quantity, but also in quality. Harvesting rice manual, I don't know if Nancy, you Abuja people, you don't know how our people farm rice. Maybe if you take a trip, go to some rural areas and see how they farm rice, you realize that harvesting rice manually involves using sickle, getting villagers to come together, hitting the grain on the ground. In doing that, it breaks the grain, it leads to broken grains. People like us that are in the processing have that issue, and then it mixes up with dust, with sand, with chaff. And by the time you take it to the rice mill, the rice miller now will be confronted with the issue of when he takes it to the parboiler, you see a lot of chaff and stones and sand and everything. So loss is tremendous loss. I'm giving you almost about 40% loss at the point of harvest alone. That is why organizations like ours, what we are currently doing now is we are partnering with rural rice farmers, and we're bringing combined harvester machines and deploying to those rural communities. And you also now bring the issue of, will they afford to pay for that? So that's why I was talking about involvement of the private sector. What we're doing as an initiative now is for the farmers that cannot pay cash, we are converting their grains, they're paying in grains. Because we are actually in production and processing and stuff like that. So these are the innovations that need to be in place if we really want to take care of, among other solutions, if you really want to take care of the post-harvest losses. But this gives you a context now, particularly to rice farming. Let's go to something like yam and tubers. Our local farmers use hoes and cutlasses. In the process of harvesting, digging out those tubers, these hoes now, you could say, injure those tubers, and by cutting those tubers, microbes and bacteria get into those tubers, they infect, they destroy these, some of these tubers at that early stage. Some of them get rotten easily, simply because of exposure to some things that they are not supposed to be exposed to, because they are using manual labor to harvest those things. and so on and so forth. So it goes along, and some of them use sun drying methodologies to, I mean, they are dependent on weather. They have to dry, and there's unpredictability of weather. They don't have modern tools to predict weathers and stuff. Some of them do sun drying of rice or vegetables and stuff like that. Whenever it's raining, it comes unannounced and it destroys the crops. And there's also the issue of distances between the farming clusters and the processing points. Long distance, most of our farmers are way deep into the wild and you have to drive far. And then there's transportation issues, bad roads, lack of processing facilities and stuff like that. So when you bring all these things, definitely you have a lot of over 50%. In 2013, I read a report, over 120 billion naira worth of maize was lost at the stage of harvest. This is just to give you a context, Nancy.
Yes, I know we do lose a lot of money when it comes to post-harvest losses. In fact, when I saw a video there that my team did put up earlier about the lady that was peeling, I can see it here now, they can put it on the screen, was peeling cassava with, you know, with knife. And when you go to the villages, yes, when you go to villages across Nigeria, this is the picture that you see. Her safety is even one thing, because she may be doing that and her hand, she will cut her hand. She is doing that, of course, some will not be, you know, peeled well and all of that. So I think you just hit it on the head, because I was even about to ask a question, how mechanization can help, you know, reduce post-harvest losses, and you did say it. Now let's take a look at this issue of how, okay, let me look at this before I go to the next question. What category of crops really do we have the most post-harvest losses? What category of crops? Of course, someone watching me will be like, okay, off the cuff, perishables, definitely. But what category of crops do we witness more post-harvest losses in quantity and more post-harvest losses in cost? They are two different things.
So that's another wonderful question, Nancy. Like, I mean, you are a jam invigilator for sure. I've categorized you, I'll give you that license. So in an attempt to answer this question, you have to look at, first of all, the impact. It's a beautiful question, which category of crops? Of course, what comes to the mind of, if we're talking about the one that has the most impact, you look at it from the impact perspective, okay, the consumption. But in terms of which crop has the most vulnerability to losses, of course, definitely you go for fruits and vegetables because of the perishable nature and the short span that they do have and stuff like that. But do they have the much impact? Because we don't rely much in terms of consumption. So when you are talking about consumption index, you have to give it to maize and of course, probably rice. Maize has, to my own understanding, maize has the most impact because we still do not have, even in mechanization, like Rice Africa is bringing in combined harvester machines for the rice sector. Our combined harvester cannot harvest rice, cannot harvest maize. You can only do rice and wheat because of the same category, but rice needs a much bigger, much larger, much more advanced sort of mechanization, and that comes with the issue of cost. And of course, it's one of the top staples. It's about number 2 or number 1 in terms of consumption. So if you're talking about vulnerability and impact to consumption, I'll give it right away to maize. But in terms of the crop, if it's crop-based, perishables like vegetables and fruits because they're short, they have the short lifespan, they're very, very fragile. When you harvest them, if you don't have ready-made processing points close by, they get to spoil within a day or 2, as compared to rice or maize that, I mean, you can bag them and keep them in your stores for a longer time. So vegetables in terms of vulnerability, but impact to the citizens, of course, maize, because that is what we consume, one of the top staples that we consume the most. Okay. I hope I've answered your question, Nancy.
Yes, I think so. You tried. Now, let's take a look at this.
I have a way of answering questions too, your jam questions.
You know, let's take a look at this just before we close, and it has perhaps 2 or 3 components. Let's take a look at the storage part of it. in this 21st century, I don't see why a country such as Nigeria that is blessed with very good weather, rainfall season and all of that, that we cannot find some fruits all year round, you know, or even some foods all year round. So what is the, how can we begin, you know, to put our storage facilities into good use? I know we have silos around the country. The former minister did talk about a review of the silos at the time, I think in 2020 or so. I think former ministers, is it Sale Nanano now? Or Sale, that was the minister of agriculture. How time flies. You don't even get their names anymore. But Akinwumi Adesina is so quick to say because he made some impact then. Where am I driving to?
Yeah.
Storage facilities, silos, how can, you know, we bring that on board, and perhaps the privatization, how is it going? Then the other part of the question would be the impact of COVID-19 on post-harvest losses that we saw in 2020. Do you think that we are out of it yet? And perhaps any other thing you need to say as we round up?
So, like I said, post-harvest losses, like I said, Nancy, cuts across all the value chain. But of course, having good storage facilities is one of those solutions. But in answering you, I would like us to be more broad. Let's take the whole thing. Let's talk about solutions, not just in terms of storage, because it's not every crop that you require that much of a storage. When we're talking about solutions to post-harvest loss, of course, having a good storage is important, but there are other issues. And we should also understand that the Nigerian population keeps growing on an annual basis, which means more mouths are to be fed and post-harvest losses must be curtailed so as to avoid the problem of food security that, like we started. And the human population this increase in human population puts so much pressure on our natural resources, and these resources are getting limited by the day, and with insecurity and so on and so forth. So there are some useful measures that, alongside the storage that you mentioned, that we can start thinking about adopting. Like, for instance, you can't talk about storage and processing if you don't solve power supply, Nancy. We need to have constant power supply. We need to also establish what we call crop processing zones. The concept of the processing zone is something that the African Development Bank under Mr. Adesina, they're doing in some African countries, whereby you you do clusters of producers, and then you set up processing points close to those producers to take care of the transportation, to take care of the fragility, to take care of all those things that we mentioned in the past. So if you have like the CPZs, the crop processing zones, and this has to be a private-public partnership, because there's a part that the public sector has to take care of, like roads, electricity, and security, water. You talked about water development too. So it's very permanent. This is public sector driven. And then you have the private sector driven, people like us that can come out and set up maybe factories and then set up linkages to markets. Okay. It's very important. Most of our local rural farmers just go to the farm and produce without any off-take analysis. They don't know what they're producing. They just go to the farm and start farming. But in most economies, most advanced, if we want agri to go to the next level, we must have an off-take driven kind of production system.
Okay, I think
whereby
Mr. Maigari,
the local rice farmer has...
If you can hear me, Mr. Maigari, I think we'll need to leave it at that at this point. You know, we can continue this conversation and talk about this thing for the next 2 hours non-stop. But many thanks to you for joining us, at least in the last 30 minutes or so, and taking a look at this. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon. God willing. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to that. Thank you.
All right, I've been speaking with Ibrahim Maigari, who is the founder and chief executive officer at Rice Africa. We've been talking about the reduction of post-harvest losses in Nigeria and the cost of post-harvest losses. Thank you all for being a part of the show today. And indeed, this week, please join us again, same time next week. I am Nancy Naji. Bye now.